He completely lost it one night and put his hands around my neck, and it just seemed like it came out of nowhere.
Kelly's ex abused her emotionally, physically and sexually, from subtle to deeply scarring behaviour. She says he slowly chipped away at her self-esteem, leaving her feeling suicidal.
At the end, it got so bad to the point he raped me in quite like a violent way, and that was kind of the turning point for me, that this is so wrong.
Completely broken, Kelly found the courage to leave and report her ex to the police.
At certain points, I felt like I was the one being investigated. I had my phone taken from me for about 4 months. I even had one police officer remark that, she said to me, "Are you sure you're not bringing this just because you're jealous that he's got a new girlfriend," or something like that. So really undermining me and made me feel terrible.
Today, a watchdog found huge inconsistencies in the way police forces deal with violence against women and girls. The report, commissioned by the Home Secretary after the murder of Sarah Everard, calls for radical reform in policing, detailing grave concerns about the number of cases closed without charges being brought, and problems, unevenness and inconsistencies in the police's response. There were major gaps in the data recorded on offences and a staggering variation across police forces in dealing with domestic abuse.
We don't think that the police can police their way out of this epidemic of crime against women and girls, and there absolutely has to be a relentless focus on prevention. And that doesn't just mean prevention in policing terms, it means addressing the societal issues that are causing men to offend in the ways and the numbers that they do against women.
The founder of the Centre for Women's Justice, Harriet Wistrich, says it's crucial that police and the Criminal Prosecution Service work more closely together.
We've seen in rape that the CPS blame the police blame the CPS, that is completely unhelpful. But we also need massive more investment into all the surrounding services as well.
But with cuts to policing in recent years, do officers have the resources for radical reform?
There is a challenge for us in policing to make sure that everybody is able to deliver the very best standard of care that they can and really show that they care about how they look after people. So, it's an issue for how you do your learning and development of people, but also about how you supervise and how you support officers to be better.
While Kelly says the way police handled her case left her feeling even more traumatised.
Like a lot of the times when I went to my therapist, it was actually more about the police and the CPS and how they spoke to me and how they managed the situation than the abuse that I was subjected to.
Minnie Stevenson with that report. And if you've been affected by any of the issues raised, you can find a range of resources to seek help and support on channel4.com/support. Well, I'm joined now by the Victims Commissioner for England and Wales, Dame Vera Baird, and by Sir Peter Fahey, who's the former Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Vera Baird first, there are no shortage of these reports. I've counted 4 from various agencies in the last few months alone, all saying pretty much the same thing, and yet nothing seems to change, except perhaps the chance of justice is getting slimmer and slimmer for women.
Yes, so this report is absolutely correct in saying that there's an epidemic of violence against women and girls, and it is equally clear that the police have not been doing a good job in trying to prevent it, protect victims, pursue perpetrators, or prosecute at all. And they recommend what I think could be transformative, which is that violence against women and girls is made part of the strategic policing requirement. Now, that's not as techie as it sounds. And counter-terrorism is part of that requirement. And when something is put into that category, there is more resource delegated to it centrally. There is some central direction because the inspectors talk about massive differences in the way forces perform in this area of work. And there is an increase in the importance that's seen of this area. Status is better for officers who specialise in it. There is more resource put into specialising. It is generally a significant uplifting of that kind of policing. And here there could not be something in which that kind of uplift is more urgent.
So
1.6
so it's
million
about priorities
every year.
So it's about priorities.
It's a lot more than priorities. I mean, it is about what Zoe Billingham, the inspector, regards as what's capable of being transformative. And I agree with her. There are undoubtedly broader needs for partnership with externals to policing. There's absolutely no doubt of that. But currently, the position is that complaints of violence against women and girls have gone up enormously, and police are dealing with them ever worse than they have before. They are not using the tools that they've got. They must do. And the Home Secretary, and well done that she did start by this report. She needs to resource it.
Let me bring Sapita Farhi in there. It is yet another damning report about the police's failure to keep women safe and to help women who have been the victims of sexual violence to get them justice.
So one thing we can agree is that the endless reports have not made enough difference, although Zoe Billingham, to be fair, does say there's been considerable improvement in the way the police deal with this. When you've got a prosecution rate for rape less than 2%, when only about 40% of rapes are actually reported, absolutely the police can always do better. But I think what Zoe Billingham was arguing for was a structural change in the way that the whole system deals with this. A much closer join up at the local level with prosecutors, with social services, obviously with the voluntary sector, with people like housing associations, and absolutely at the same time to look at prevention, to absolutely how do you try and address these underlying causes, things like the amount of material on the internet, social media, all the things which are driving this huge rise in violence and some of the really damaged attitudes and criminal attitudes that many young men seem to have women, and just the police improving their act and making a few changes, although that would be important, and absolutely it's a very good comparison to make with the effort that goes into terrorism. I think we are letting victims down unless we make a radical change, because too many victims are saying the product being offered by the criminal justice system is not one that I think is going to meet my needs.
And absolutely, and we talk about systems, but I want to talk for a moment about, you mentioned attitudes. Now, you were heavily criticised when you were head of Greater Manchester Police for the force's failure to properly investigate some of the grooming gangs and scandal that was in Rochdale 10 years ago. We are still hearing the same criticisms that forces around the country are still not treating women who are victims of sexual violence sensitively. They're still not being investigated properly. Too many of these cases, there's no further action. Is that a cultural problem that the police is now so ingrained in the police it can't be changed?
No, I don't agree. There's always cultural aspects in the very nature of policing. It's about the use of power, and a minority of officers misuse that power, including in relationships. But I think, we avoid the key issue here, the fact that we need a very different system to cope with the nature of modern relationships. And as I say, a system which is absolutely directed towards what are the needs of that victim and the reality of their life. As I say, always the police can do more. They can improve the system. But I think too many officers feel that, they get to know the victim, they understand their needs, they understand their situation, and just feel that, the reality of the court system, the trauma, the huge delays that there are at the moment, and the fact that that victim is going to feel the consequences of that for the rest of their life, that essentially they can't meet that victim's needs. And I think the victim realised that, and that's why so many pull out during the process.
So just very briefly, is it for you an issue, Sapita, about resources?
No, I don't think it's just about resources. I think it is about commitment. I think it is about the level of commitment, exactly as Dame Vera said, about that's going into counter-terrorism. But I think it's about us having, that courage to actually, challenge the fundamentals of the system, to look at the needs of victims, to look at the nature of modern offending within relationships, and to say that the current system, even if we try and improve it, needs much more fundamental change if we're going to bring about justice of victims, greater protection, and a reduction in this awful figure of one woman being killed every 3 days.
Vera, very briefly to you, are you at all optimistic that we will see any of the change that we are constantly talking about?
Well, frankly, not if all police have the attitude that Peter is showing right now. It is very fine to discuss greater partnership working. That's recommended in every report. The police have the tools to prevent, that's Clare's law, to protect, that's protective orders, and to prosecute when they're broken. They are there to pursue perpetrators. They are there to charge. They do none of that. Zoe Billingham is absolutely clear that these tools need to be used, and they need to be used now. A woman is killed every 3 days by a violent man. The police had better get on with doing their job properly, as she recommends. And yes, of course, we'll consider the philosophy of it in the longer term, but women are not expendable while we do that.
So very, very briefly, your response to that, Sir Peter, that the police still need to do much more.
Well, we've kept on saying that for years and years, and it hasn't made that degree of difference. I would agree that there needs to be fundamental reform of the police, as most police chiefs serving now do. But the fact is, as I say, I think the key thing is what the victims are saying, and the fact that so many are not even approaching the criminal justice system and pulling out when they get into the process itself.
There's still so much more to say and hear from both of you. I'm sorry, we will have to leave it there, but thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you.